I get it, you are staring at a dozen electric guitars on the screen, and the thought of picking the wrong one feels like a financial gamble you can't afford. You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through forums, watching endless demo videos, and maybe even reading a couple of user reviews that just end up sounding like marketing copy. The fear is real. You want an instrument that fits your style, that won't let you down on stage or in the studio, and that actually justifies the price tag. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's talk about the Ibanez JBBM40PW, the JB Brubaker signature model that's been turning heads in the metal and hard rock community. First off, this isn't a generic entry-level guitar, it's a tribute to a player who's built his reputation on speed, precision, and a tone that cuts through a mix like a laser. That heritage shows up in the hardware choices, which are the real workhorses when you're riffing at 200 BPM or bending notes in a solo that lasts longer than a coffee break. The thing that sets this model apart is the combination of the EMG 85 in the neck and the EMG 81 at the bridge. Those active pickups are a staple for players who need high output without sacrificing clarity, so if you've ever felt your tone get lost under a wall of distortion, this pairing is worth a second look. Who should actually consider this axe? If you're a guitarist who spends most of your time in the heavier genres, think modern metal, thrash, or even aggressive blues rock, the high-output EMGs will give you that aggressive punch straight out of the amp. The Ebony fretboard adds a slick, fast feel that's ideal for shredding runs, and the Gotoh MGT locking tuners mean you won't spend half your gig time fighting intonation after a whammy bar dive. Players who already own a solid-state amp or a high-gain pedal board will find the guitar's output sits nicely in the mix without needing to crank the amp to splitting levels. Also, if you're a gigging musician who swaps guitars mid-set, the locking tuners and Gibraltar standard AI bridge make string changes and tuning stability a breeze, no more stopping the show to retune a squeaky string. On the flip side, this isn't the best pick for someone chasing vintage, mellow tones or for a beginner who's just learning chord shapes. The EMG 85/81 combo leans heavily toward a modern, tight sound, so if you're after the warm, woody character of a single coil or a vintage humbucker, you might feel like you're forcing a sound that isn't natural to the instrument. The bridge, while rock solid, is a fixed Gibraltar standard AI, which some players love for its sustain, but it does limit the subtle vibrato tricks you could get from a tremolo system. If you're the type who likes to experiment with dive bombs or subtle pitch modulations, you'll have to accept that this guitar is built for stability, not flamboyant whammy action. Let's dig into the day-to-day experience of actually plugging this thing in. I took it to a local rehearsal space that's got a fairly neutral room acoustic, and I ran it through a 4x12 cabinet with a 100-watt amp headset to a high-gain channel. Right off the bat, the EMG bridge pickup delivered that tight, articulate bite you expect from a modern metal pickup. Every palm-muted chug sat cleanly in the mix, and the sustain held long enough for me to let notes ring without getting lost in the distortion. Switching to the neck EMG 85, the tone softened just enough to give solo passages a smoother, more singing quality, but it still retained that edge that keeps the notes from sounding mushy. The Ebony fretboard really shone here. The low-profile radius felt natural under fast fretting, and the smoothness meant my fingers didn't catch on the wood during rapid legato runs. One practical point that often gets overlooked is how the guitar handles different string gauges. Because the Gotoh MGT locking tuners lock the strings in place, I was able to swap from a .010-.046 set to a heavier .011-.052 set without having to restring the entire instrument. The bridge's intonation held up after a couple of hours of playing, which is a relief for anyone who's ever been stuck tuning a new set of strings for days because the bridge just wouldn't stay in tune. That kind of reliability is a hidden value that many beginners don't think about until they're on stage and the tuning slips mid-solo. Now, let's talk about the aesthetic side. The pearl white finish is eye-catching, and it's not just for show. The glossy coat is surprisingly resistant to the scratches you pick up from a gig bag or a hard knock on a stage floor. It's also worth noting that the finish doesn't feel overly thick, which can sometimes mute resonance. In practice, the tone feels open, not dampened, and the visual appeal can actually boost confidence when you're stepping onto a stage. That said, the high gloss finish.